Hi, this is Chris Solari from the Detroit Free Press, along with Rainer Sabin, Orion Sang. We're here to preview the Michigan State game in an abnormal way. Normally, we would be in person somewhere talking a little bit about this game and the rivalry. In normal years, we would have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people ready for it. The people are ready, but they're not going to be in the stands. And guys, I think looking at this game and the abnormal approach that we have to take in terms of the off season and jumping into this, I'm not necessarily sure if from a Michigan State standpoint, you could be facing Michigan at a worse time, installing new systems with a new coaching staff, coming off a loss to Rutgers to open the season. And then, week 2, by the way, you got to go to Ann Arbor and play this game. Rainer, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's going to fall in line with what most people's expectations are. I mean, you've got a program that was transitioning that had to build their program on the fly in the middle of the pandemic. Didn't have much time to do install and such, and they looked like a team that again was somewhat disorganized coming out of the gates. And then you have Michigan, which is year 2 of an offensive system. They look much more confident in everything they did. Execution wise, they were really on point. And, defensively, it's the same old with Don Brown getting a lot of pressure and such. And I think, again, that's going to be a real problem for Michigan State with the offensive line situation. I can see, again, a lot of pressure, a lot of forced mistakes on Michigan State's part. Don't see 7 turnovers, but who knows? I mean, so I do think that this game has the potential to get real lopsided real quick.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be 7 turnovers. It could be 3 turnovers at the wrong spot in the field or the wrong time in the game that can do it. Orion, you were in Minneapolis for that game. I guess, what did you see up close with Michigan in their win over Minnesota on Saturday? I got to see the tail end of it after getting out of the Michigan State game, and that defense looked like it kept building and building towards a crescendo in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, I guess defensively it was more boom than bust. I mean, they gave up 4 drives of 70-plus yards, with only 17 points from those drives. So they did a good job of stopping Minnesota when they really had to. And aside from those 4 drives, they got off the field really quickly. There was that fumble return for a touchdown that happened on like a first or second play of one drive, and they forced a couple out of 3 and outs. So they were able to get off the field quickly when they had to. They gave us some prolonged drives, but it was kind of the bend, don't break variety there. As for offensively, they really got it going in a run game. They had a gap scheme, zone schemes. Everything was working for them. They're doing really well in a quarterback run game too. And that's what I'll be watching against Michigan State. Can Michigan State's interior hold up? I know they don't have Raekwon Williams from last year. He was a really great player. So is Michigan going to be able to run the ball? If they are, with effectiveness, that could make it a really long day for Michigan State's defense.
Yeah, and 45 of the last 50 meetings, the team that won the rushing battle won the game in this rivalry. And from Michigan State's standpoint on defense, I think their middle is pretty strong. I think with Naquan Jones, Jacob Sladen, and I thought the 2 backups played fairly decent as well, and Deshaun Mallory and Jalen Hunt both kind of coming into their own. I think that's not their issue. I think they got to figure out the edge. I thought Jacob Panashuk, who's expected to be one of the best pass rushers and edge containers in the conference, struggled against Rutgers. But Drew Beasley, who was a guy that was a former walk-on that nobody really kind of expected to kind of become a starter, let alone be an impact starter, was graded out from Pro Football Focus as one of the best defensive ends of the week. Go figure, a Michigan State walk-on putting some effort in at defensive end. But the shift of the 4-2-5 defense is going to be an interesting matchup in this, because I think Michigan's built to run power, and that defense struggles with it. And, from an offensive standpoint in Michigan State's run game, it's not there. I think in the last 2 games against Michigan, they've only run for 69 yards combined. They're coming off a 50-yard performance on 39 carries against Rutgers last week. The offensive line, as Rainer mentioned, looked bad. And some of that comes from not having reps. And you can have as many experienced veterans as you want, but if you aren't getting the cohesion and reps to build that up front, you certainly are going to struggle. You're going to struggle with cohesion and with consistency and blocking. And I think you saw that particularly in the tackle spots. I thought that was where Michigan State had struggled the most. And, from a running back standpoint, you had Connor Hayward start over Elijah Collins. You had true freshman Jordan Simmons being the ball carrier of note, leading the team in yards and carries. So there's some flux going on there, which was the one spot that people thought coming into the year might be Michigan State's best option. But Rainer, when you look at the two quarterbacks in this matchup, neither of them have really had much experience. They've dabbled in it. They've gotten a little bit of soaking, but it's different when you become the starting quarterback in this rivalry. Kind of size up the Joe Milton and Rocky Lombardi situation.
Oh, I thought Joe Milton played, very effectively in the opener. He was just consistent, didn't make any real mistakes that, I saw. I mean, it seemed like he just made one sound decision after another and, delivered accurate passes. And they didn't ask him to do too much. And, the big shots and everything that they were talking about in the preseason didn't really materialize, but they didn't have to. And he, kept the chains moving, strung together really impressive drives, not only just with his arm, but, with his legs, and just managed the offense really well. I mean, he's like a better game manager type in that sense. I mean, I think he has the potential to grow into, a dynamic quarterback. But for now, I mean, he did exactly what, Michigan could have, hoped for, especially in the opener. Whereas Rocky Lombardi, obviously, there was, the interceptions and, but, he didn't really operate, at all with the clean pocket that Joe Milton did. And so I think that, had an effect too. Also, there were drops and other mistakes that, where they didn't seem to be on the same page. There was that one bad interception, against Rutgers that, kind of indicated that they've got some mechanical issues that they have to work out in the offense. And so, obviously I think the advantage is, weighted towards Michigan in this matchup and at the quarterback level. But, do I think that Rocky Lombardi, and the Michigan State offense is going to perform at the level that they did against Rutgers? No, because, I mean, I don't think they could, perform much worse. I mean, from a turnover standpoint and such, but, I think it's obviously going to be favoring Michigan based off of what we saw in the openers.
Orion, coming out of Saturday's game, Jim Harbaugh obviously had to be pleased with what he saw. I mean, that's a quality opponent that they played. How does Michigan now look at the game tape on Michigan State and Rutgers and not get too overconfident in that?
Well, I think it's pretty easy not to do that. I mean, some of those turnovers just seemed like flukes, kind of like day one type of things. I mean, there's a drop punt. Reed had a couple. I mean, there's a stripped ball. I saw that the whistle could have been blown on that play. It's like a bang play, 50-50 play. So I think Michigan knows that Michigan State's not going to turn the ball over 7 times again, and that really cost them against Rutgers. I think they probably would have won the game if you cut that down to 3 or 4. So I think they won't be, overconfident. And they understand, this is a big game for both teams, huge game for Michigan State. So I think there's that aspect of it too. I do think when I look back on the game tape, there's a couple things that they might be excited, maybe, for lack of a better word, to maybe take advantage of. I thought against Rutgers, Michigan State's linebackers struggled a bit in terms of what they were seeing in front of them. I thought Rutgers was able to mess with them a little bit in terms of moving them one way and getting the ball going the other. And Michigan did that against Minnesota too, with some of the bubble screens off of run action that they did. So I think Michigan will try to take advantage of that and get to the edge by messing with some of Michigan State's linebackers. I also think, Michigan State's line, I personally think highly of the future of that group. When you look at a 2019 class, I think there's a lot of young talent there. They just need time and development. But Saturday, they just weren't that good. And Michigan has 2 guys off the edge and Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson. I think they can win some matchups there one-on-one. And if you can win your matchups rushing 4 guys and dropping the rest in coverage, that's going to make it really hard to pass the ball when you don't have to blitz and take guys out of the back end. So those are the 2 things I'm kind of watching for based on what I saw against Rutgers from Michigan State and what I saw against Minnesota from Michigan.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on the defensive ends for Michigan. That line is going to get some penetration, and I know that Rocky Lombardi, one of the players that he mentioned was Hutchinson in particular. I thought in the limited ability that I had to watch the Michigan game, I thought Kwity Paye played great. I thought he was aggressive, and I think that's kind of the type of rush that Michigan State has struggled with the past few years, all the way back to 2017 when Joey Bosa abused him a little bit, or maybe it was Nick Bosa, one of the Bosas. But who didn't do Bosa's abuse? But when you have high end pass rushers, sometimes those 2-3-star offensive line recruits who haven't developed will struggle with that. I agree with you too. Is the group is young behind the guys that are starting right now, but there's a lot of veterans on that group that struggled against Rutgers, and I think that from a defensive standpoint, that 4-2-5 is going to take some adjustment because they've got schematic differences and philosophical differences from what Mark D'Antonio wanted and demanded versus what Mel Tucker wants and demanded. And those are the kind of things that spring practice is essential for. And to try and do an install in 20-some days, 28 days, and not getting to hit for until a month, I mean, that's tough. That's tough going. And I think Michigan State right now is in a bind because of the circumstances that happen in the off season outside of their own control. They didn't get to do all that install. Now you got to just kind of learn on the fly. And that's really what I think this year is for the Spartans. But guys, let's kind of run through some predictions. I'll start with Ryan, mostly because you're on the right side of the screen, and I'll work my way back to myself here. Ryan, what do you see happening on Saturday?
I think Michigan will be able to win the game. I picked 31-14, I think, before the season. I think it could be a little bit more lopsided than that. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Michigan State cover. I mean, that spread is pretty big in my opinion. And weird things could happen in this game. I don't think they're going to turn the ball over 7 times. I think that was a fluke. I think they'll be better with protecting the ball and they'll get luckier with fumbles. Fumbles. Michigan had a couple of them and picked them right back up. It's a lot of luck involved in those turnovers. So I think I'll say Michigan wins 34-14. I'll call it that. I think Michigan has more talent on defense, more talent on offense, so I think they will win. But I think Michigan State will hit a couple plays. I think Jalen Reed looked pretty explosive. I think he could be a dynamic playmaker for them. And it could be like last year's game where it was pretty close for the first quarter or two, and before Michigan pulled away. I think it could play out in a similar fashion.
Rainer, yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be, fairly lopsided. I'm thinking somewhere like 38-17 or something like that. I just think, Michigan has, a lot more firepower on offense, and then you combine it with, the defensive integrity that they have. I think it's, and the pressure that they're going to be able to generate, I think, by rushing 4. And what Orion suggested with, dropping, 8 in coverage or 7 in coverage. And I mean, it's going to be able to, I just think, the way that it lines up, it doesn't favor Michigan State at this point. I think if this game was later in the season, I think it may have been closer. Michigan State may have been able to, kind of get things in order a little bit more. Just coming off that, defeat and just the optics of it, it's just not great going into a game like this. Everybody's kind of talking about what happened last week with Michigan State, which is exactly what happened last year in a lot of ways with, they blew that 25-point lead in the fourth quarter against Illinois. And so in that sense, it's a lot of what happened last week, instead of being able to just directly focus on what's going to happen this week. And so I think that doesn't play into Michigan State's favor either. So I think it's going to be a pretty lopsided game. And yeah, again, like 38-17 is probably my prediction.
Yeah, I got to tend to agree with you guys. And I also agree with what you said about the timing of this game from Michigan State's standpoint. If they had a couple extra games under their belt, I think there would have been a lot different of a competitive nature. I think that the way that Mel Tucker is kind of molded in that D'Antonio Sabin mindset, The game's going to be important. I think they will be competitive for a while. But I just think that the way that everything has transpired and the fact that really, I mean, last week was their spring game. This is in a lot of ways their debut, and it's a tough way to debut in that, if you're looking at it that way. Could it end up maybe like D'Antonio's first game against Michigan, where in 2007 they were competitive into the fourth quarter? Yeah, it could. Same with that 2016 game where no one really gave Michigan State much of a chance when they were in that 3-9 season, and it ended up being a 9-point game just because of a late score. It was competitive for 4 quarters. But this, I just think the timing of it, the fact that you've got a lot of guys that haven't played a lot of football for Michigan State, haven't played in this rivalry, and now are doing so under a new coach. There obviously is some unknowns to that. But I think there's also the fact that Michigan understands where this game is and still feels the sting of those 2010s. I think Michigan State ends up losing this game to Michigan. I'd probably say about 40-16, maybe 40-17 in that range. Just I think the offense will be able to put up a little bit, maybe more than we thought, maybe more than the 10 last year. All right. Well, for Rainer, for Orion, this is Chris Solari. Make sure you stay tuned to freep.com the rest of the weekend, and on Saturday for the noon kickoff on Fox. That'll be the only way you guys get to see it. We'll be in the stadium. Take care. We'll see you.